A Trump tweet last month said North Korea was behaving badly. Now, analysts say these satellite pictures of its Punggye-ri nuclear test site indicate that test number 6 is now imminent. Since January, North Korea's been test-firing long-range missiles. One great unknown is how close it now is to being able to stick a nuke on a rocket. The other is how to stop the erratic, recalcitrant ruler of the world's most belligerent country from careering lemming-like towards nuclear holocaust. Trump's claim that he can, with or without Chinese help, was less a threat to North Korea and more an ultimatum to China.
China has great influence over North Korea, and China will either decide to help us with North Korea or they won't. If they do, that will be very good for China, and if they don't, it won't be good for anyone. If China is not going to solve North Korea, we will. That is all I am telling you.
Last month, when his Secretary of State met President Xi in Beijing, Rex Tillerson declared that the era of strategic patience was over. Trump is now escalating his coercion of China before his Xi Jinping summit on Thursday. Asked by the FT if he meant he'd go it alone, Trump said totally.
You're going to see President Trump meet with President Xi and
just yesterday, though, his ambassador to the UN made clear that unilateralism wasn't the game plan.
What should we do about North Korea?
No longer take the excuses from China that they're concerned too. They need to show us how concerned they are. They need to put pressure on North Korea. The only country that can stop North Korea is China.
China keeps the Pyongyang regime running. Beijing worries that too much pressure could lead to conflict or regime collapse, both potentially catastrophic. China still favors dialogue and cautiously using its leverage. Nothing so far has worked. Attempting regime change could be disastrous. America plans to deploy a missile defense system to protect South Korea, but that has irked Beijing a lot. Meanwhile, combined military exercises involving US, South Korean and Japanese troops have irked the paranoid Pyongyang regime even more. A North Korean minister condemned the war games and promised that Pyongyang would mercilessly smash and annihilate its enemies and reduce the American imperialists to ruins. As the Donald J. Trump regime seeks to define its policy towards that of the young Kim Jong-un, none of the options is good. Trump's projection of hard power has made China nervous, and with the stakes so high, he cannot afford to alienate President Xi, Marshal Kim's only friend in the world.
Jonathan Miller reporting. Well, Donald Trump has been appearing before the media at the White House this afternoon. Our Washington correspondent Kylie Morris joins us now. Kylie.
Yeah, Jack, it's a very big week for diplomacy here, but I think just to say it is important to see these comments on North Korea in the context of President Trump's meeting, that all-important meeting with President Xi at the end of the week. Remember, President Trump is doing diplomacy in the way he does business. He's the deal maker. He starts with a belligerent statement of some kind, and then when it gets down to it, softens his posture. That's been his approach thus far, and I think we're seeing that again this week. Unlike a real estate deal, though, this time the American president will be talking to the leader of a strategic and economic superpower who is himself used to setting terms. It's the final meeting in a very big foreign policy week. King Abdullah of Jordan is here on Wednesday, and today, as you mentioned, the president welcomed in the warmest possible terms the Egyptian President al-Sisi, who used to be persona non grata in this town, suddenly Donald Trump's oldest and dearest ally. Let's listen in on that.
President al-Sisi has been somebody that's been very close to me from the first time I met him. I met during the campaign, and at that point there were two of us, and we both met, and hopefully you like me a lot more. But it was a very long, it was supposed to be just a quick, brief meeting, and we were with each other for a long period of time.
And on to a regular award.
Clearly thrilled to have finally made it to the White House after the coup he led in 2013. Today, though, not a whisper about human rights significantly, although the State Department only last month criticised his government for failing to investigate abuses by security forces and contributing, they said, to an environment of impunity. Not on the agenda today. This is about continued security cooperation, particularly the fight against the so-called Islamic State.
OK, well, I'm joined now by Malcolm Chalmers, the Director of the Proliferation and Nuclear Policy Programme at the Royal United Services Institute. Thanks for coming to the studio, Malcolm. Is Trump being reckless, or is this actually the bold move that might break the kind of cycle of diplomacy over North Korea?
Well, the question of what China will do has been central to American North Korean policy for as long as I can remember. And for as long as I can remember, American administrations have war-gamed the military option in North Korea and found that the costs of it were simply unaffordable.
So is he doing the right thing by putting all the pressure on China? You know, sort this out or I will, as Jackie said.
Well, China has got different objectives from the United States in relation to North Korea. China doesn't want regime collapse, with all that would mean for its own security. And therefore, it's not prepared to it wants to put some pressure on. China doesn't like what North Korea is doing. China has sponsored more friendly North Korean leaders, but in recent years, their life expectancy has been very short. So China's running out of options, just like the Americans are.
OK. We're now joined also from Colorado by Christopher Hill. There you are. He's the Dean of the Joseph Corbell School of International Studies at the University of Colorado in Denver. Good afternoon to you, sir. I don't know if you could hear Malcolm Chalmers earlier, but the key question here is whether Donald Trump is coming up with a rather bold move here that will finally break the deadlock, or whether he's doing something really reckless. Where do you stand on this question?
It's always difficult to tell. I mean, whether he's kind of gone through the briefing book or whether he's just kind of saying what's on his mind. I mean, clearly he's making the point that, look, we'd like to work with China. In fact, that statement was very much in there. But if not, we'll just go it alone. The key question is really, what does he mean, go it alone? What are we going to do? I mean, if he's talking military options, we have the inconvenient fact that some 20 million South Koreans live within artillery range of some 14,000 North Korean artillery pieces. So it is very true that all the wargaming suggests that there'd be a lot of civilian casualties. And if you're going to go that route, it seems to me you have to work extremely closely with the Republic of Korea. So we would not be, quote, going it alone. I think a more fruitful approach would, of course, be to work with China, see if they could do more on the sanctions, make it clear that as long as there's a North Korean threat, there are going to be U.S. Missiles in South Korea, anti-ballistic missiles that the Chinese are very upset about. But, that's just tough. They're going to have to accept that as long as there's a North Korean threat. I think the fundamental problem with China is that they do not have a consensus about what to do in this situation. There are a lot of Chinese officials who have this historical tie to North Korea, and then others who don't. And it's just no consensus in a consensus society.
OK, is it also briefly true that China would rather see a nuclear North Korea than a collapsed North Korea?
I think the Chinese have a lot of concerns about a collapsed North Korea. They worry, would the U.S. put troops in the northern part of what would then be a unified peninsula under the Republic of Korea? Would the U.S. be putting listening posts up on the Chinese border? In fact, a big problem they've had with this anti-ballistic missile system is its radar and the capability of looking way into China and seeing the various things going on in China. So they have a lot of concerns about what a unified Korea under a U.S. ally would mean. And I think it behooves the Trump administration to take a deep dive with the Chinese and reach some understandings of what it would mean and what it would not mean. Because ultimately, I think a unified Korean peninsula is a better outcome than a nuclear North Korea.
OK, Malcolm Chalmers, briefly, how dangerous is this moment at the moment? I mean, you've got Trump's rhetoric here, you've got the Chinese obviously upset about the change of balance, and you've got the North Koreans throwing their toys out of the pram.
I think it is a very dangerous moment because the longer the Americans delay, the worse the military options get. And North Korea is on a path sometime in the next 5 to 10 years of having probably long-range missiles capable of delivering nuclear warheads on the continental United States itself. No American president can look at that prospect with any sense of anything but trepidation.
Christopher Hill, is North Korea the issue that would keep you up most of the night, more than anything in the Middle East or indeed Russia?
Yes, I think anytime you talk nuclear weapons, that's really what is problematic. I mean, Lord knows we have concerns about terrorism emanating out of the Middle East, but compared to what a North Korean missile strike against the mainland of the U.S. could mean, it is truly the issue. And I completely agree with the proposition that it's getting tougher and tougher. And the closer they get to a deliverable nuclear weapon, the more difficult it is to kind of dissuade them from this. So I am of the view that this really should be number one.
Okay, so very briefly and finally, is Trump the right man to deal with the situation in the way that he's dealing with it?
Well, I have problems with making vague threats and not having any idea of what that means or how that would play out. I think the Chinese look at Donald Trump. They kind of like the idea of a strong leader, but I think they're very worried about a leader who doesn't normally crack his briefing book and doesn't appear to have a lot of substantive background to draw on.
Okay, that's pretty damning. Christopher Hill, Malcolm Chalmers, thank you very much indeed.